They knew the pill was addictive. They knew it was killing people. They sold it anyway. 500,000 Americans dead. 500,000 Americans are dead. Not from disease, not from accidents, not from anything natural. They are dead because a family decided profit mattered more than human life. Purdue Pharma, a pharmaceutical company that created OxyContin, a pill so addictive, so deadly, so profitable, that the Sackler family, the billionaires who owned it, knowingly turned America into a nation of addicts and made $20 billion doing it. This is the story of how one family's greed created the deadliest drug epidemic in American history. The Sackler family was not famous. They did not make movies. They did not own sports teams. They did not have their names on buildings or museums. But they were among the richest families in America, worth over $13 billion, built almost entirely on the back of one product, OxyContin, a prescription painkiller that would become the most abused and most deadly drug in American history. This is the story of how the Sackler family built a fortune on addiction, and how they nearly got away with it. The story starts in the 1990s. The pharmaceutical industry was changing. Doctors were becoming more conservative with pain medication. They understood addiction was a serious risk. They were cautious about prescribing opioids. But Purdue Pharma saw an opportunity. They developed a new long-acting painkiller called OxyContin, and they decided to market it aggressively to doctors for any type of pain. Not just cancer pain, not just severe chronic pain, any pain. Backaches, arthritis, dental pain. Purdue Pharma began a massive marketing campaign aimed directly at physicians. They sent salespeople to doctors' offices. They sponsored medical conferences. They paid doctors to speak about pain management. And they told doctors that OxyContin was safe, that addiction risk was low, that patients could take it long-term without becoming addicted. Every single claim was a lie. Purdue Pharma knew OxyContin was addictive. Internal documents from the company show that executives discussed the addiction risk openly. They knew patients were becoming dependent. They knew doctors were reporting addiction cases. They knew their own salespeople were telling physicians that addiction risk was less than 1%. A number Purdue Pharma knew was completely false. The real addiction rate was 20 to 30% or higher. But Purdue Pharma suppressed that information. They buried the research. They paid doctors who would downplay addiction risks. And they continued pushing OxyContin onto the American public. The strategy worked. By the early 2000s, OxyContin had become a blockbuster drug. Hundreds of millions of pills distributed, billions of dollars in revenue flowing into Purdue Pharma. And the Sackler family was getting richer every single day. But the human cost was staggering. People were becoming addicted in record numbers. Patients who took OxyContin as prescribed were developing full-blown heroin addictions. Doctors had no idea what was happening. They thought they were treating pain responsibly. They had no idea Purdue Pharma had lied to them. By the mid-2000s, OxyContin abuse had become a national crisis. Prescription pills were being crushed and snorted. They were being dissolved and injected. Emergency rooms across the country were overflowing with overdose cases. And Purdue Pharma knew. They had data showing overdose deaths were skyrocketing. They had reports from poison control centers. They had hospital admissions data. And they did nothing. They did not warn doctors. They did not reduce production. They did not pull the product off the market. Instead, they continued marketing OxyContin. They continued telling doctors it was safe. And they continued making billions. The Sackler family became billionaires on the back of a drug epidemic. They bought mansions. They funded museums. They donated to universities and hospitals. Their names appeared on buildings. They became philanthropists, respected members of the cultural elite, all while 500,000 Americans were dying from the very product that made them rich. Finally, in the late 2000s, regulators and prosecutors began investigating. They discovered internal Purdue Pharma documents showing the company knew about addiction risks. They found evidence of intentional deception. They found proof that executives had knowingly lied to doctors. In 2007, Purdue Pharma pleaded guilty to criminal charges of misbranding. The company paid a $634 million fine. But here is what made people furious. Nobody went to prison. Not a single executive faced criminal charges. The Sackler family did not face any personal liability. The company paid the fine. The company pleaded guilty, but the people responsible walked free. The scandal did not end there. In 2017, the opioid crisis was in full swing. Tens of thousands were dying every year, and Purdue Pharma was still profiting, still selling OxyContin, still making billions. Regulators launched a new investigation, this time focusing on deceptive marketing and the addictive properties of the drug. But Purdue Pharma fought back. They delayed, they obstructed, they hired powerful lawyers and lobbyists. They fought the lawsuits tooth and nail. In 2019, Purdue Pharma filed for bankruptcy, not because they ran out of money, but as a legal strategy to shield the Sackler family from personal liability. The company declared bankruptcy while the Sackler family was still worth over $13 billion. It was one of the most brazen uses of bankruptcy law in American history. The company hid behind bankruptcy court. The family protected their wealth, and the victims were left fighting for compensation. In 2021, after years of litigation, Purdue Pharma reached a settlement with state and local governments, $8 billion. It sounded enormous until you did the math. $8 billion divided among 50 states, divided among thousands of municipalities, divided among families who had lost loved ones. $8 billion for 500,000 dead Americans. That is $16,000 per death. The Sackler family paid the settlement but admitted no wrongdoing. They did not apologize. They did not accept responsibility. They just paid the money and walked away, protected by bankruptcy law, protected by powerful lawyers, protected by their wealth. Here is what is most infuriating about the Purdue Pharma story. Everyone involved knew the truth. The Sackler family knew. The executives knew. The salespeople knew. The doctors who took kickbacks knew. And they did nothing. They watched the body count rise and did nothing. They watched families destroyed and did nothing. They watched communities devastated and did nothing. Because stopping meant losing billions, and no amount of human suffering was worth that price. The Purdue Pharma scandal is not just a story about corporate greed. It is a story about systemic failure, regulatory agencies that moved too slowly, doctors who were deceived and never held accountable, lawyers who protected billionaires from consequences, and a legal system that allowed bankruptcy to shield the wealthy from responsibility. 500,000 Americans are dead. The Sackler family is still billionaires. This is Boardroom Fallout, where billion-dollar lies come to light. Subscribe now, because this story is not finished.